All right, so a few days ago, the New York Times posted this lengthy article on the company of Amazon. And in it's really long. It took me about 10 to 15 minutes to read the whole thing. But basically, they kind of created this negative overtone around Amazon and around the white-collar labor force, basically stating that they're being overworked. Even at times, people would cry out of fear or out of just the competitiveness of the Amazon culture. And there are just many people that they tried to interview and basically, again, set a negative overtone in terms of the work style and workflow of Amazon. And of course, Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, responded to the article, wrote some things back, basically saying like, I wouldn't work at the company that the New York Times was describing. That would be crazy. So my good buddy Chris, who has worked at Amazon for 6 years.
3.5 years.
3.5. How did I think it was 6 years?
I don't know, you just made it up.
I think it was 6 years. 3.5 years. My good buddy Chris worked at Amazon for a bit. So we have a little bit of inside information, inside experience. So what do you think about this article? Do you think it portrayed your workplace appropriately?
So it's I just wrote a blog post about it at Merit and Grace because several people asked me for my thoughts on it, and
Okay.
One of the reasons why is probably because for the Theology of Technology group that we had at Amazon, I gathered some other Christians together to study the theology of technology, and we eventually did a series called Succeeding at Amazon as a Christian, where we took the Amazon leadership principles and compared them to Scripture to see if conforming to that would also help us conform to Christ and vice versa. So in any case, people asked me what my opinion was, and I read that New York Times article, and I was surprised mostly because I actually knew some of the people they were quoting personally.
Oh, wow.
I worked with them. My software was meant to help some of them, and I worked with them to get them to use it. And so I actually I have fond memories of interacting with them and trying to help them succeed in their goals and tasks. But what I didn't know was probably that they were experiencing the kinds of hardship that they were quoted as saying in the.
You didn't know?
I knew that work was tough, but I never
Yeah.
thought it was like to that degree.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of surprised me, and gave me some compassion for them. And I think that the article had its own agenda, the New York Times one, and I don't actually agree with with what it was hinting at, like saying like, oh, Jeff Bezos is this evil warlord who's masterminded this scheme that lets him abuse white collar labor or whatever it was that they were trying to say.
Right.
I don't think that really is the case, and I also don't think that they mistakenly identify the data driven culture and the kind of truthful culture of Amazon as the cause of this kind of pain and pressure.
Yeah.
I think they've really misdiagnosed the real issue because it has nothing to do with... You want to be in a culture where people tell the truth to each other, right? You want to be in a culture where people don't give...
honest.
Yeah, where people are honest and they basically want to look at the reality, the facts, and they want to work through what is actually the right thing to do in the situation and not just like, the leader feels like doing this, so let's do that.
Right.
Driven
Or
just
like
by
peer pressure too, like everybody's doing that, so let's just do it.
Peer pressure, absolutely. You want a culture where people are holding each other accountable to do what's right, and so I think they misdiagnosed the problem. And what I wrote in my blog post was actually Jeff Bezos in the company all hands meetings. There was one question that I remember that would always come up in every all hands. And that was like, what's the biggest risk to Amazon for the next 5 years?
What is an all hands? Is that like
an all hands meeting is like a whole company meeting where everybody in the headquarters, like the Seattle area, who works for Amazon can come and is invited to be there.
So you go there basically?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I would go to those meetings.
Okay.
Not everybody would go. Some people would just skip, but I went.
Okay, cool.
Because I wanted to hear it right from the leadership of the company.
Yeah.
That's what an all hands is.
Okay.
And so every single time, I remember Jeff saying something like this, like, what's the biggest risk to Amazon in the next 5 years? And he would say something like that: we will value social cohesion instead of truth. Truth seeking is exhausting. Finding the right answer, compromising with someone else is easier. Seeking the truth and the right answer is critical, so don't fall victim to this social cohesion mentality to compromise for pragmatic reasons. So
Interesting.
basically, human beings, we naturally just want to kind of get along.
Yeah.
And so when there's disagreements, it's really tempting to just like, oh, let's just compromise.
Yeah.
Right? So you disagree about this decision, like, should we build the software this way or that? Should we pursue this market or not? Or whatever it might be. Like, the tendency will be just to try to get along rather than to figure out what should we really do based on the truth and the reality and experiments and other things like that. So his big fear was that the company culture would erode and would move towards a culture where everybody's just trying to make everybody else happy instead of seeking the truth.
Okay.
And so I think, and I think that we experience that actually a lot, even in Christian culture. A lot of churches or nonprofits or whatever, because nobody wants to make anyone feel bad. So you get kind of a different kind of thing, maybe like passive aggressive behavior, where you're nice on the outside, but behind like you're disagreeing actually, and you'll do other things to undermine your disagreement with that decision. And it's just not healthy. It's not good. And so that's why I diagnose the problem actually as not having to do with a data-driven culture, not having to do with a culture where people really hold each other accountable and try to dive deep to figure out what's wrong with an idea or what's right and to do the right thing. But it really is that it's really that you can misuse data and you can misuse that kind of culture that values seeking the truth for your own political agendas. And then you start basically degenerating into social cohesion, but it's different kind of social cohesion. So in a culture where being nice is valued, then social cohesion looks like everybody has to be nice to each other, not hurt anybody else's feelings, and just try to compromise and keep the, don't rock the boat kind of mentality, even if it's the wrong decision. Right? And then that will kill a company. Right. It may not kill a nonprofit that can last for a long time, just kind of because of the relational ties, but it would kill a company.
Right.
Right. And so that was Jeff Bezos' fear, that culture of just kind of being nice and compromising on the truth. But if in a culture that is so-called valuing truth and hard facts and data and everything like that, you actually can still...
You're swinging to the other extreme.
But you can still play the social cohesion game.
Right.
If you get what I'm saying. It's like, well, okay, I know how to get the data that will convince you to do what I want you to do. I know how to make that data happen, and I know how to put the pressure on so that you do things the way that I want you to do.
Right.
And I know how to, like, in the leadership meeting, make you look bad in front of the other managers or make you look good so that you get promoted or you don't get promoted. Or, like, there's all the politics, and that's really at the heart of what's going on, I think, from being on the inside. And that's completely different than like a data-driven culture is a good thing, I think. But it can be misused just like a niceness culture can be misused.
Right. So that was one thing that the article kept talking about. Like there was this sort of like you're basically being metriced all the time. That's what they're basically saying in the article. And because of that, like people use that data to backstab other people. And is that kind of what you were talking about? And also,
I'm saying that's possible. That can be used that way. If that's the name of the game, then anyone with that kind of agenda can do that.
Right.
And so I think that subtly and unexpectedly, perhaps for Jeff, he's getting a social cohesion culture in his company, but not in the way that he feared. In a different way altogether. And so in what I wrote, like, basically it's not surprising that these examples of oppression have happened. Right? Because he's at the very top.
Yeah.
He's the CEO, and to him, like, his company's doing really well. He loves coming to work every day, right? He tells people what to do.
And they do it.
And he's surrounded by smart people who will even disagree with him and commit still to his decisions or whatever, like the way that he thinks it should work, right? He's getting to invent the future, having a lot of fun doing it. That's great, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's just that he believes that his whole company is that way and that these are isolated incidences. But they probably are not. And that it's time for him to kind of follow his own leadership principles and dive deep, right? And dive deep, partly what that means is that you can't just like ignore like how things actually work. You have to go deep into the guts and find out what's really broken here. And however deep you have to go. You ask why 5 times. Like, why did the New York Times release this article? Right? Why were they able to find these people who had this experience? Why were these people experiencing this kind of terrible culture that I wouldn't want to work for in my company? And why were they not able to report to HR or get help when they needed it? Or why were those managers able to do that? And then ask that why question 5 layers deep. So dive really deep, get to the heart of it, and then correct those dysfunctions so that his company actually embodies the very values that he himself wants. And I think that that's really what this article is kind of, regardless of the biases in the article and the misrepresentations and the truth of people's experiences, like, is really that this is just a really great diagnostic for him to say, hey, Mr. Bezos, something's going on in your company, and you probably need to dive deep to correct that and to change it. So,
I mean, it's kind of like a red flag, but I mean, things could have been a lot worse, I guess, for him. Like, someone could have actually stepped up and, I don't know, sued the company.
They could sue, but the truth is that with those cases, like, I think there wasn't enough grounds for that.
That's true.
And it's not really about protecting from lawsuit or protecting from harm. I think that he's a unique kind of leader because he really does want to have a culture where builders can build,
right?
Or they are inventing the future and they're simplifying, right? Where people earn each other's trust, where people dive deep and are right a lot in the decisions that they make, where they take ownership over the long term. And so those are some leadership principles that his company wants to abide by, that he wants to abide by. So even, the way that he replied to his employees was good. He said that if any of you guys are experiencing something like this, it's not tolerated, even if it's isolated. You should talk to HR, or you can escalate to me. And that's good. That's a good first step. Now, the only other thing that I had to say about it was that I don't think that it's quite enough, though, because what happens is that when people are victims or under oppression, they're scared or they're shy. Like, they don't want to just be a whistleblower and to see what happens to their manager and they get impacted by that, or they don't want to cause trouble, right? And maybe if they brought it up with HR, they might feel like, or if they escalated to Jeff, they might feel like, this is not that big of a deal. Like, I'm sure this is normal, and so for everyone who's willing to be vocal, there's maybe, I'm making up a statistic, maybe there's 10 other people who are experiencing something similar, who aren't speaking up, and they might just rather take the easier route and maybe just leave the company or something. And so that's why it's not enough just to say that, hey, anybody who wants to, you can talk to me or whatever. That's not quite enough. As a leader, you have to kind of inject yourself and step in and dive deep and figure out what's going on in my management chain. Like, why are there even, managers who are treating people like this? And what's gone wrong here? And then how do we correct that? So that's what I think, that if he was proactive about it, he could create a company culture where the entire company really does experience the kind of joy of inventing that he's getting to experience at the top. And I know that, when I was there, I saw good examples and I saw bad examples. There's some management decisions that are made based on data. There were some that were based on politics. And you could tell. But there's no path of escalation to try to correct that. You can even advocate for the leadership principles, but it's politics, right? If the leaders don't want to listen, then they're going to kill. They have the power to do what they want to do. I've seen one friend who has a great manager who got promoted shortly after he joined, and then he got a pay raise shortly after that. Like, it was like his manager's just doing such an amazing job of developing him, looking out for him, and giving him great opportunities, and taking care of him. And I've seen other people who their managers have put him on a performance improvement plan, even though they're completely competent. And then just to basically remove them or to manipulate them to get them to do what they wanted them to do.
So that part of the article was actually correct when they're saying that some people rise quickly, some people just fall quickly. And
I don't remember that part of the article exactly, but I've seen it. I've seen it happen. And I'll be frank, I attribute it to the managers. There's amazing managers who use their power for good and to serve their team, and there's other managers who are trying to just use their people to advance their own careers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so, in that kind of setting, it's not surprising. And the company's so big, and there's so many layers of management. So it's really unsurprising that this New York Times article could come out that way. And I think that it's great from the top that he's trying to set the tone, but if he dives deep, then he can actually correct the issues. And so in my article, I proposed a new leadership principle if they wanted to add it.
Jeff, are you listening?
I don't think he's listening to the TheoTech podcast, but I'll throw it out there. Basically, the principle is called "Do What's Right." Leaders do what is right, even when it means sacrificing their own interests. They use their power to serve others instead of using others for their own ends. They commend those who do likewise and correct those who do not.
Interesting.
Do what's right. So.
And final curiosity. I know the article described people crying and people going into meetings or conferences and having their ideas shot and scattered. And was that your experience?
No, not at all. I didn't experience that. But definitely, when you're working with a lot of smart people, I'll say this, okay? I think did the article say Amazon's a place where overachievers go to feel bad about themselves?
Yes. Yeah.
I like that quote. And the reason why I like it is that you can't ignore this deeper underlying hierarchy. All right, like there are people who are very smart and very intelligent, and there are people who are less so. And that's not a. And the problem is, if you tie your self-worth to your intelligence, then you're going to fall apart whether you're smart or you're not smart.
Because there's always someone smarter than you.
Not only that, so let's say that you don't feel like you're working hard enough, you're not smart enough, or whatever like that, right? So you're so insecure.
Yeah.
And so you feel like, I got to keep proving myself. I got to keep working so hard. I got to burn myself out to try to advance in my career. And that's going to destroy you. Even if your manager didn't make you do that, you will internally do that.
Right.
Because your identity your self-worth is built on
Intelligence.
how smart you are, how successful you are, how much money you're making, your promotion level. And that is not a good foundation for life.
Yeah.
I mean, as Christians, that's why we believe Christ is our identity.
Right.
He's the one who's the smartest, the righteous, the best, the supreme. And he loves us as we are, forgives all of our sins, and gives us his identity, his perfection to be our own, to clothe us. And that's a solid foundation for self-worth, to have God's approval of you based on his grace and not based on your performance. That's huge.
And that actually inspires people to continue to improve. At least for me, like when I believe that I'm loved and I'm secure, then I'm actually like much more productive in what I love to do. So.
And it unleashes you.
Yeah.
Because you're not worried about your performance now. And how you can grow, you can learn, you can do amazing things that you never thought you could by grace rather than by performance. So that's one aspect if you're on this weaker end. And if you're on the smarter end, yeah, there's always people smarter than you. And not only that, but you're kind of abusing your power. God gave you your intellect not to tear people apart, to build them up.
Yeah.
That's what it's for. And so you're going to be judged actually for misusing your intellect, which was a gift. You should be using it to actually lift up the people who may not be as intelligent, and to teach them, so that if their ideas are incorrect, you build them up by showing them how to do it the right way. And your goal is not to build your self-worth by putting other people down, right?
Right.
Your goal is to serve others so that they're lifted up, and you don't have to worry about your self-worth again.
Yeah.
So this is like the deeper hierarchy that you can't ignore. And I think it's at the root of even kind of some of the burnout that I read about and things like that. Yeah, if you're trying to if you think that your identity is built on your success at Amazon, that can destroy you, even if you don't have a terrible manager who's abusing you. It's going to be driven by internally. And then if you're a manager who's not able to serve others, then you're going to use people,
Right. Right.
rather than unleashing them.
Yeah.
So I think that's the deeper thing, and that's actually why the gospel is so powerful, even in a corporate setting, in transforming the culture, so that people are joyfully inventing the way that Jeff Bezos wants his company to do.
Right.